Chapter 13. Joseph's hoarse screams rattled the beams of the cottage. What a wonderful sound, Catherine thought. She stared up at his empty eye sockets. Those beautiful blue eyes were no more. Never again would they twinkle as they tricked another girl. Joseph collapsed in a heap. She dropped back down to the floor. Then she sat on her haunches and daintily licked his blood off her paws. The blood tasted almost as delicious as her triumph. Something moved to her left. She froze, her black paw still in her mouth. In a flash, she remembered how Joseph had been laughing when she came in, how his head had been turned to his left. There was someone else in the room. Then she spotted him. Joseph's brother, William. The boy's chest heaved in terror. William moved forward cautiously. Catherine's own heart beat faster. What would he do? William watched her closely, taking one step at a time. He moved closer. Did he think she would run? He stood between her and the door, between her and freedom. Use her instincts, Gwendolyn had said. Catherine let out a furious hiss. She made her shiny black hair stand on end. William shrank back. It worked! What a coward, she scoffed. Then William dived forward and grabbed her around the throat with both hands. Chapter 14. With a frantic cry, William squeezed Catherine's throat, choking off her breath. He twisted her head, tried to break her neck. She pulled back with all her might, tried to work her head out of his grasp. His hand slipped. She sank her white fangs deep into the meat of William's palm. Ah! He cried out and hurled her to the floor. She lay there for a moment, too dazed to move. Then, pulling herself up, Catherine raced out of the house, into the night. Gwendolyn, where are you? Catherine could not find Gwendolyn anywhere. She heard William running after her. He had hurt her badly. She gasped for breath. She dragged herself around the corner of the house, slinked through the slats in the fence of the garden. She pulled herself a few yards along the cold, hard soil, then stopped. She heard William's footsteps, very close. He is going to catch me. I am going to die. Then she remembered her mother's words. You are a shapeshifter, too. Yes. She had changed from a girl to a cat. Perhaps she could also change from cat to girl. A moment later, William limped around the side of the house. He cradled his bleeding hand against his body. Catherine stood against the wall, shaking out her long brown hair. She saw William's eyes go wide with amazement. Catherine, he gasped. Did you see a black cat running? It clawed. William broke off. Catherine shook her head. Stay away from black cats, William, she warned coyly. Black cats mean bad luck. She gave him a smile, then hurried off into the darkness. Lucky for me the moon is not full, thought Catherine, trying to catch her breath. If there had been a little more light, William might have noticed the red marks his fingers had left on my neck. She made her way through the empty town in triumph. She had taken her revenge on Joseph. More than that, she had found her true nature, her true home. The colony that had tortured her and scared her for so long would hold no power over her any more. She turned toward her parents', her foster parents' house, to gather her belongings. The small house lay covered in darkness, deserted. As she walked up the wooden steps to the front door, it opened. Adam Hatchett blocked her way. She saw the musket in his hands. He raised the musket, pointing it at her chest. The bad luck must die, he said. Then he pulled the trigger. Part 4. Shadyside, 1995. Chapter 15. Nice. Is that all you can say? It's nice. Brian, Misty complained, I already told you it's a great-looking car. Give me a break, okay? I mean, what do you want me to do? Kiss it? You're getting closer, Alan joked. Brian had convinced Misty to come with him and Alan to see the car for herself. As he had put it on the phone, this way she could get up close and personal with the Cataluna. She could finally understand his obsession. The Cataluna sat in its usual spot, the far corner of the lot away from the other cars. The three of them circled the car in the moonlight. When they talked, the chilly air froze their breath in little white clouds. To Brian, the car seemed almost alive, magical. He half expected the headlights to follow them as they moved around it, the way the eyes in paintings sometimes seem to do. Misty, check out the chrome work, Brian urged, showing her. Notice all this detail. Isn't that awesome? You don't see that on most cars. Uh-huh. Doesn't she realize this car is 1 in a million? Brian thought, annoyed. Misty stuffed her hands deeper into the pockets of her suede jacket. I'm sorry, she muttered, but this is a little boring. Brian glared at her. She made a face back. We saw the car, and now what? Can we go to a movie? Oh, I forgot. She gave Brian a genuinely sympathetic glance. She knew she had goofed. We were going to rent a movie, right? Brian didn't know why he had insisted they save money tonight. Stuffed into the back of his sock drawer inside his Coke safe can, he now had $200 extra. 2 big ones that he hadn't had yesterday. No. The stolen money was for one purpose and one purpose only, Brian told himself, the Cataluna. If he spent any of that money on trivial stuff like a date, it would somehow make his crime more wrong. I know, Misty said. How about that new Winona Ryder film with Keanu Reeves? Have either of you guys seen that? I think it's out on video by now. Alan moaned. I rented it last week and I hated it. I got so bored I ate a whole bag of Reese's Pieces. I broke out so bad. I should have saved time and glued the candy directly to my forehead. He kicked a pebble. Brian stiffened. The rock had come dangerously close to hitting his precious car. Come on, let's go to the movies, Alan said. He glanced at Brian. My treat. Great, Misty cried, clapping. You two go, Brian told them. I have to go somewhere. He noticed Alan and Misty exchanging glances. You sure, man? Alan asked. Yeah. Misty pulled him aside. Bri, she said softly, concern clouding her big green eyes. What? Alan wandered away, letting them have their privacy. He started drumming on the top of the Cataluna with both palms. Brian tried to concentrate on what Misty was saying, but he kept wanting to yell at Alan to cut it out. Please come, Misty begged. No, I can't. I told you. I have to do something. Misty stared down, watching her white Reebok sneaker scuff the pavement. When she glanced back up, Brian could tell she felt hurt. Go where? She asked in a low voice. Once he had started lying to Misty, the lies kept going, faster and faster. Somewhere, he mumbled. I don't get it, she exclaimed. First you cancel out on our dance date, now you can't even rent a movie? Yeah, I'm really sorry, but... But what? He felt all squirmy inside. Why couldn't she accept the fact that he had to go? He thought about reminding her that she promised he never had to make excuses to her. What happened to that? I'm really worried about you, Brian. You've been acting strange. You're not yourself. I'm serious. He gazed across the street at the dark windows of a muffler shop that had closed. I'm just tired, I guess. Come on, let's get out of here. Alan drove them away from the lot. No one talked much. Finally, Alan pulled up in front of Brian's house, a small green clapboard that badly needed repainting. He hated it when his 2 rich friends came anywhere near the place. So embarrassing. Brian, Alan cautioned. Time to reconsider, dude. Seriously, this is the point of no return. You leave now, and you leave me alone with Misty. And as we all know, there's no way any woman can resist me for long. Nobody laughed. Sorry, Brian muttered. So, what are you guys going to do? Without you? Alan replied. We'll probably just sit and cry. Seriously. Well, I still want to go to the movies, Alan turned to Misty. Sure, Misty agreed, staring straight at Brian. Why am I throwing Alan and Misty together? Brian asked himself, but he trusted Alan. Alan would never try anything. Brian climbed out, then leaned in the window to kiss Misty goodbye. I'm fine, he told her. He could tell she thought something was wrong. Hey, Brian added cheerfully, next Saturday night, I'm going to make this up to you in a big way, okay? I mean, that date we talked about for tonight, it won't be like anything compared to next Saturday night, and that's a promise. Brian, she said, you don't have to. But he stepped back before she could finish her sentence. Thanks for the ride, Alan, he called. Then he turned and trotted up the walk to his house. He stepped inside and quietly shut the door behind him. He hid in the dark by the window. He could see Alan and Misty in the car watching the house, talking. About him, he knew. No sound came from inside the house. Who knew where his parents were? Good. Alan pulled away, and Brian stepped back outside. He hiked for almost 30 minutes, heading away from his neighborhood, to a better neighborhood. He reached Canyon Road. Here the houses all had 2-car garages and 2 cars in them. The kinds of houses with cash lying around. More Ben Franklins waiting on glass coffee tables. Easy pickings, as easy as last time. The first 2 houses he passed had lots of lights on. He spotted someone moving around in a bedroom window. He strolled for a couple of blocks more before he found a house with all the lights off. He started across the lawn. Spotlights flashed on. He stood frozen. The lights clicked back off. Motion detectors, he realized. Had anyone seen him? He hurried back to the sidewalk, then jogged into the shadows. He crossed the street, then stopped when he found the perfect house. A large Victorian loomed before him, its castle-like turrets lifted high into the darkness. A porch wrapped around the right side. No lights on in the entire place. No cars in a large garage. Best of all, a broken streetlight in front of the house. Standing under a large tree, Brian felt safe. Such total darkness would cover his actions from the entire world. He strode up the driveway, through the open pass-through garage, into the backyard. No light on in back either, no dogs barking. Perfect. The huge house towered over Brian like a giant sleeping monster. Brian almost lost his nerve, but he forced himself to continue. He climbed the steps to the porch. His shoes rasped noisily against the cement. Then he pulled open the porch door, slowly. He set 1 foot inside the porch. A gunshot rang out. Brian uttered a cry and went flying backward. Chapter 16. Brian landed on his back on the cement porch. His head hit hard. Pain throbbed through his body. Then he heard laughter, screams, then another gunshot, and another. The sounds came from a TV. But if someone watched TV inside the house, that meant... He scrambled to his feet. His head rang. His back throbbed. The shot had been fake, but the fall had been real. He hurried back through the garage and out to the street. The TV had warned him that someone was home. If it hadn't been for some fake gunshot in a TV movie, he might be in jail right now. He cursed himself. I can't believe I'm actually robbing houses, he thought. Car or no car, it's wrong. Brian had tried to explain to Alan and Misty how much the car meant to him, but he couldn't make them understand. 1 or 2 more thefts and he'd have the down payment. After that, he could swing the monthly payments with his salary from the flower store. He'd go back to being himself, Brian Folger. And what is so great about that? He stood on the sidewalk. He had every right to be there. No one owned the sidewalks. But he felt so scared and guilty. He wouldn't have been surprised if a cop car zoomed down on him and a police officer arrested him for being outside late at night. As he waited for his breathing to return to normal, he stared across the street at the house opposite the big old Victorian. Smaller, no car in front, no light in the windows. Those signs fooled you once already, he reminded himself. But what are the odds that 2 dark houses would have people inside? Rubbing his aching neck, he crossed the street. Then he glimpsed the mailbox. Pieces of mail stuck out of the box's metal mouth. The mail hadn't been taken in for several days. He remembered something else he could check, something from his newspaper delivery days. He trotted up the walk to the porch. Yes! He found several rolled-up papers on the doormat. A few more lay around the side of the porch where the paper boy had tossed them. These people had gone away without canceling the paper, or asking their TV-watching neighbors to collect the papers for them. Dumb. They had set out a welcome mat for Brian. He tried the garage door, locked. He stood on tiptoes and peered through the small windows. Empty. He circled around to the side of the garage, but he discovered a metal fence. No problem. He climbed up and over, step 1. In the darkness, he made out a small, kidney-shaped swimming pool covered with a blue tarp. Wet leaves lay on top. A small patio had been furnished with ugly metal lawn chairs. The chairs seemed to light up as they caught the silvery glow of the crescent moon. He tried the back door, locked of course. It's not going to be that easy, thought Brian. They don't give you the money. You have to use your head. He found a rock. He slipped off his black sweater and wrapped it around the rock. He struck the rock against the back window. Once. Twice. The glass cracked. Pieces fell inside the house. Too much noise, Brian thought, even with the sweater. He waited for a long time, watching the windows of the house, checking the houses he could see on either side. No lights came on. No alarm sounded. Safe. Tell that to his body. His head felt as if it might come flying off. He could feel his blood pumping wildly. Crazy. His pumping blood carried the word to all parts of his body. His hands trembled as he reached through the hole in the window. His hand scraped against the jagged glass. He swore. Brian found the lock on the sash and turned it. Carefully, he eased his cut hand back out of the hole. He studied the wound. Not too bad. A small price to pay. He slid the window up, hoisted himself through. Then he slid the window shut behind him. I'm in. Yes! He crept forward, his hands groping blindly in front of him. He should have brought a flashlight. On TV, all thieves carry long black flashlights and wore black ski masks. Now he knew why. Something hard sliced into his knee. He grunted. His eyes adjusted to the darkness. He'd bumped into a heavy wooden desk chair. The chair stood in front of a roll-top desk. He started to slide up the top. It stuck. He forced it open. He pulled out papers from the cubbyholes inside, holding them up to his eyes. Envelopes, stamps. He thought about turning on a light, but he didn't want to take the chance. You've been lucky. Don't push it, he told himself. Besides, he liked being in the dark. he could pretend he wasn't really here. He made his way out of the study into the living room, then up a wide front staircase. Upstairs he found the master bedroom, a huge bed with a wooden frame, tall, hulking dressers, his and hers, one on either side. Brian started with his. He explored the top of the dresser with his hands, holding each discovery close to his eyes. He found a few scattered coins, a shoehorn, a seashell, other worthless objects. He opened the top drawer, underwear. He started to close it. Then he remembered his own underwear drawer at home, and a Coke can safe hidden in back. He reached deep into the drawer, worked his fingers through the layers of cloth and the furry balls of rolled-up socks, until he found something cool and smooth. A box. You are a genius, Brian, he told himself. He had never paid himself such a high compliment in his life. He pulled the box out and held it up to the trickle of light from the bedroom window, a cigar box. He opened it, whistled softly through his teeth. Stacks of bills rubber-banded together. Brian had a recurring dream throughout his life. In the dream, he found a shiny silver dime lying by the side of the road. Then another. Then another. Pure joy filled him as he collected those free coins. For the first time, life matched his dreams. Here was all the money he needed to buy the Cataluna, and then some. What if this is a dream? What if I wake up and all the bills have disappeared the way those shiny dimes always did? He reached his hand slowly into the box. He gently felt the thick wads of cash. Definitely real. He lifted the first pile out of the box. Two strong hands grabbed him from behind. Chapter 17. Freeze. Police, a voice said softly but firmly. Lights flashed on. Brian dropped the box and the money. The hands yanked him away from the window and shoved him up against the wall. His nose smashed into the wall. He could taste the blood trickling down into his mouth. Large, strong hands moved over his body, slapping at pockets. He had no weapon. He hadn't even remembered to bring a flashlight. Someone pulled his hands painfully close together behind him. He felt cold steel slip around his wrists. Click, click, handcuffed. Hands turned him around. He blinked. Two cops, a man and a woman, stood there, both big, both in bulky blue uniforms. The man stood farther away, his gun drawn. The woman had grabbed him, frisked him, cuffed him. Both cops appeared shocked. The female officer cursed. "How old are you, kid? 12? Brian gulped for air. He thought he might faint or throw up. He couldn't speak. "So stupid," the other cop growled. His walkie-talkie blared. He pulled it off his belt and reported Brian's capture. How did you know I was here?" Brian choked out as it led him out of the bedroom. It's so unfair, Brian thought. He had been so careful, so quiet. He had come so close. He had held the money in his hands. "The alarm, kid," explains the woman cop. "You set off the alarm." Dazed, Brian stumbled outside. The cop car sat parked out front. Its red and blue rack of lights flashed crazily in the darkness. The female cop pushed his head down roughly and shoved him into the back of the patrol car. "What alarm?" Brian asked. "Stupid question, Bri," he told himself. "You're being arrested. What does it matter how you got caught?" "I didn't hear any alarm." His voice shook. "It rings at the station," the cop replied as she climbed into the front of the car. "It's a silent alarm." Jail, Brian thought. I'm going to jail. On the day of Brian's appearance in juvenile court, his father shaved carefully. Unusual enough. But then Mr. Folger put on his best clothes, a chocolate-brown three-piece suit that Brian never even knew his father owned. Mr. Folger appeared pale. He didn't speak a word all the way to court. Brian's dad often picked on him for nothing. Now he had the perfect reason to yell at him, and he didn't. That made Brian feel even worse. The pain on his father's face hurt Brian more than any insults his dad could throw at him. During the hearing, Brian stared at the floor. He felt too ashamed to meet anyone's gaze. He tried to estimate the number of tiles in the floor, anything to distract him from the woman police officer's testimony. Finally, the judge asked him to stand for sentencing. Here it comes, Brian thought. He glanced up at the judge's stern expression. He doesn't like me. He's going to send me to juvenile prison. Brian shifted nervously from foot to foot. Since this is your first offense, and since you are still a minor, I'm going to suspend your sentence, the judge informed him. I do not want to find you in my courtroom again, Brian. You only get this chance once. I'm not going to prison. I can't believe it. In addition, the judge continued, I'm going to assign you 3 months of community service. It's an experimental program, Brian, designed to help young offenders such as yourself. As part of this program, You'll be assigned a guidance counselor. You'll have to check in with a counselor twice a week. I'm free, Brian thought. He hurried out of the courthouse with his parents. He wanted to run. He wanted to shout for joy. Then he saw her. Brian felt his stomach flip. Misty, standing by the courthouse steps. What could he say to her? Brian! She threw her arms around his neck. He let her hold him. Brian stood stiffly, hands at his sides. At last she pulled away. She raised her eyes to his. I've really disappointed her now, Brian thought. I came to say goodbye, she told him. He hadn't been expecting that. He didn't know what he had been expecting, but not that. The last thing he needed to hear today. Goodbye? She blinked quickly, trying not to cry. My parents? They won't let me go out with you any more. How could you do it, Brian? How could you? Brian shrugged helplessly. He couldn't really explain, not even to himself. He just knew he had to have the Cataluna. Even now, with Misty saying goodbye to him, the sick expression on his dad's face, his mother's tears, he wanted that car. He needed the Cataluna. The Folgers' phone rang. It had been ringing all day. Brian didn't want to talk to anyone. Brian, his mother knocked softly on his locked bedroom door. It's Alan on the phone. He's been calling all afternoon. Tell him. He wanted to say, tell him I died, but he stopped himself. His mother would start crying again. Brian didn't want to make her feel any worse. Tell him I'll call him back in an hour, I promise. That's what you said last time, Brian. I promise, he repeated dully. After his mother's footsteps pattered away, Brian pulled down the window shades all the way to the bottom, blocked out the fall sunshine. He sat on the edge of his bed, hands clasped tightly around his knees, rocking himself back and forth. Icy air seeped through the cracks in the window frames, but Brian felt perspiration roll down his forehead. If a surgeon cut open his brain right now, Brian knew they would find a single picture, a picture of a sleek white car. He held out for 20 minutes more, then charged out of his room and bounded down the stairs. He opened the front door as Alan raised his hand to knock. Instead of knocking on the door, Alan knocked softly on Brian's forehead. Hey, Bri, I've called you like 1,000,000 times. Alan, hi. I can't talk right now. I'm really late, and... Brian pushed past him, hurrying away down the walk. Brian! Alan spoke so sharply that Brian had to stop. He stared back at his friend. I need to talk to you, Brian. Sorry, I'll have to call you later. He climbed onto his bike. The bike wobbled once as Brian pedaled up over the grass between sidewalk and street, then bumped down onto the pavement. He picked up speed. He didn't turn back. He had to see the Cataluna. And 2 packs of gum, come too. He punched a button. The register rang up the total and popped open. $2.59. The heavy-set woman reached for her purse. She didn't open it. Maybe you can help me. I want to get something for my friend's daughter. She had a baby girl, but I couldn't find anything I liked. Can you recommend something? Brian gave a wide smile. His old Happy Burger smile. He'd been using it ever since he started doing his community service work at the hospital gift shop. I like those teddy bears over there, he pointed. The ones that say, I was born at Shadyside Hospital. Oh, those are cute. Actually, they are pretty dopey, Brian thought. Who would feel good about a gift someone had obviously picked up at the last second in the hospital gift shop? So bogus. He watched the woman pick up several bears, checking the prices. Whenever she glanced back his way, he gave her the smile. But his mind had drifted far away, 2 miles away to be exact. Denny's car lot. A week had gone by since he'd seen it last. What if someone bought the car? 1 house. That's probably all it would take. Rob 1 house. And this time he would have experience. He knew what to do. He'd case out the place for several days. Learn the people's schedules, and... Brian? Yeah. His supervisor, Mrs. Glenn, put a hand on his shoulder. I have to run out for a moment. Can you watch the store by yourself? Of course. He gave her the smile. She smiled back. Oh, he called, glancing at the clock. I'm off in 10 minutes. I'll be back before then, but if you need to go, make sure the door locks behind you and put the sign up. Right. She left him alone. Standing at the register, the open register, all the bills lined up for him in their neat little slots. I'm volunteering here, Brian thought. Not making a cent. I lost my job at the florist shop. $300 in the register, maybe more. The faces on the bills smiled at him. They whispered in his ear, Take me. Take me. Chapter 18. Brian's hand slipped into the register. He kept his eyes on the customer. She stood checking out the rack of teddy bears. No one else in the store. Without glancing down, he removed most of the cash in a $10 slot. He stuffed the bills into his pocket. Then he lifted the tray and grabbed the 20s underneath. Shoved them into his pocket, too. He started to close the register drawer. Then he remembered the customer. "Ma'am, I'm going to be leaving soon." "Oh, I'm sorry," she apologized. "I can't seem to make up my mind. I'm terrible about decisions. Do you ever have that problem?" "I have bigger problems, believe me," thought Brian. He started to sweat. He stared at the front door. He wanted to be out of there before Mrs. Glenn returned. Sirens of alarm blasted in his brain. Mrs. Glenn would know right away that he took the money. She knew he was doing community service work because he'd been caught stealing. This is crazy, Brian thought, completely crazy. Too late to put the money back. Come on, he silently urged the customer. Hurry! At last, she came back up to the register, carrying 2 teddy bears. Both pink, identical. "I think I've narrowed it down to these 2. Which one would you take if you were me?" "I'd take either one and take it fast, because otherwise I'm going to end up in jail." "That one." "This one? Are you sure? Why?" "Why?" "I don't know. It's got cuter eyes." The customer glanced from one bear to the other and back again. I'm going to scream, Brian thought. Finally, she said, "Okay, I'll trust your judgment." She set the bear on the counter and reached for her purse. He rang up the sale. "That's $21.39. The customer put a 20 on the counter. She pulled a crumpled single from the bottom of her purse. "Now, let me see," the customer began. She fumbled inside her purse for change. She counted out 2 dimes and a nickel. Then came a bunch of pennies. "These pennies make me crazy," she said. "They fill up your pockets. I'm always trying to get rid of them." She counted up to 26 cents. "That's close enough," Brian told her. He scooped the change off the counter and dumped it into the register without even bothering to sort it into the proper trays. He tossed the teddy bear into a plastic bag along with the woman's gum, roll of lifesavers, and Bic pen. He came around the register, handed her the bag, and walked her to the door. "It's nice to see a young man working," she remarked. "Thank you." He pulled the open sign off the door. Stuck on one with a cutesy drawing of a guy in traction. It read, "Back in a minute, please be patient." He pulled the door shut behind him. The woman blocked his way. "It's been a pleasure doing business with you, young man." "Sure." He managed one last smile. A cold drop of sweat raced down his cheek. He could feel dampness around the edge of his collar and under his armpits. He moved past the woman and across the wide hospital lobby. The revolving doors spun before he could step inside. "Brian, hi! What a surprise." Mr. Palmer beamed at him. The elderly man lived 2 doors down from Brian's old house, where they used to live before his dad lost his job. Mr. Palmer's smile suddenly vanished. "But why are you at the hospital? I hope no one's sick." No, nothing like that," Brian reassured him, trying to move past the old man. "I'm doing some volunteer work here, but I've got to—" Mr. Palmer gripped Brian's elbow with fingers like claws. "How are your parents these days? They don't come by to see me. Your father owes me a game of chess. Tell him that, will you?" He poked Brian in the chest. "Is he afraid he'll lose?" "Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is. But listen, Mr. Palmer, I'm really in kind of a rush." "You could come by too, you know. Wouldn't kill you." "I will, I promise." Mr. Palmer stared down and frowned. What does he see? Brian glanced down too. The tips of several green bills poked out of his pocket. He stuffed them back inside. "What grade are you in now?" asked Mr. Palmer. "You're a junior now, unless my memory fails me, right?" "Senior. This is my senior year." "Ah, then it's time to think about college. But I don't have to tell you that. I'm sure you've already got it all planned out. A bright boy like you. What colleges did you apply to? Let me hear the list." "Mr. Palmer." Now, don't try to weasel out of it." Brian turned and gazed across the lobby. Mrs. Glenn stepped around the corner. "Mr. Palmer," he said, "I swear I'll come by and see you real soon. You can beat me at chess and everything." He gently but firmly removed the old man's hand from his elbow. "But right now, I've got to go. Really." Brian plunged into the revolving door, banging his head hard before he started the door moving. "Yes, I'm out." His heart pounding, he ran to his bike, jumped on it, and started pedaling furiously. "You're going to get caught," he told himself over and over. "You're crazy." Brian pedaled faster. He skidded to a stop in front of his house, dropped the bike on the lawn, slammed through the front door, climbed the stairs to his bedroom 2 at a time. He dumped his underwear drawer out on his bed. Frantically, he twisted off the secret screw-top lid of the Coke can safe. He pulled out all his money. He didn't have to count it. He knew he had enough money now. He grabbed the money and flew down the stairs, back out to his bike. "The car is mine," he shouted as he pedaled to Denny's. "It's mine! Mine!" The 2 miles seemed to take forever. Finally, he bounced over the sidewalk in front of the car lot. He leaped off the bike, letting it clatter to the ground. He turned to the spot where the car was kept. "No," he wailed. "No, it can't be." The Cataluna was gone.